near 1 or 2 children and asked them if they would like to go out into the yard and play some game without shouting too much. Soon the word spread, and within seconds, all was quiet, and they looked at me hopefully. We went out, we played running, catching. We played not with too much noise, but with a great deal of joy, and then returned tired and happy to the classroom. This example is from one visit I made. But what if we can bring about this pause and then a mindfulness on a daily basis in our own settings? My memory of that visit is how eager the children were for me to come again. Of course, if I was with them regularly, I would have to be mindful not only to keep them happy, but also to make sure they were learning and growing. But with this quality of mindfulness, I feel sure it can be done. Darshana, can we go back to the screen? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Next one, after this. Yeah. So it seems to me that a learning mind is an open mind where no limits or barriers have been set up. It is a curious mind which receives not passively, but with alertness. It is a fresh mind that springs not from the past nor from a future projection, but from the living present. It receives without resistance or with opinions that are already formed. It may even be called a vulnerable mind, which does not put up defenses or reactions as a step towards disagreement. To me, all this adds up to the whole of mindfulness. Sorry, the power has gone here, so my husband is kindly getting me a lamp. Yeah, I think we have technology, but we also have problems with technology. Sorry, this is lighting up my face too much. Yeah, so I hope this is all not too abstract, because I feel each one of these is really a very significant thing to keep in mind. It's not like precepts that we learn, but we just imbibe them, and then that's who we are. It's possible. Let me tell you, it is possible. Next one, Darshana. So now we come to how we can function with this mindfulness at the best of times, right? Now, I want to say straight away that these may sound very simple, and maybe these are things that you all are doing already. But I think it's important to have, to understand that these can have deeper layers, and just to absorb what I'm sharing. So the first thing that I want to share, I have 5 points like this. The first thing is curating the collection to ensure diversity and inclusion. Now, curating is a word that is being used a lot nowadays, and it means to gather a collection that is chosen with care, with a curative purpose. So we can understand it as an act of filtering and selecting with a view to get the best, right? So we are all aware of the importance of a good collection in the library, and all of us as librarians do try as a rule to tick all the boxes to make sure our material has good information, authenticity, currency, and a wide range of fiction. But can we go further and curate a collection which touches upon inclusion, differences, diversity, social issues, books which deal with current and real life situations? This can be done by having a sharp eye while acquiring new books, by weeding out irrelevant material regularly, and by being observant about reading preferences and reading trends. More and more, it is critical to go beyond catalogs and lists to order books. I feel this strongly. I think we need to be alive and aware of what it is we are ordering. A discerning lens in the eye and a listening ear on the part of a mindful librarian goes a long way to bring about an outstanding collection, and therefore, mind you, an outstanding collection brings about a group of outstanding readers. Next, please. Yeah, I just showed you a glimpse. I just would like to show you a glimpse of some outstanding books. I'm sure many of you have all these. These are Indian publications, and they are for a younger group, but they have thoughtful themes which can be taken up even with older children, and probably can. I won't go into details, but I do hope you have these books. Yes, next. So the second point I have flows directly from the previous one, and that is initiating and facilitating conversations and discussions around meaningful books and related issues. When there are books written about thoughtful subjects, it's natural that students would like to talk about the content and the theme. So a mindful librarian reads along with the students and is able to initiate and sustain interesting conversations. And this brings added value to the library culture. Alberto Manguel, I don't know how many of you have heard of him. And can you see this book? Sorry, the light is so bad. Anyway, this is his name. He is from Argentina, and he is, I think at present, or was till very recently, the librarian of the National Library of Argentina. And he has written a number of fascinating books about reading and the reader. This one that I showed you is called A Reader on Reading. Those of you who are really interested could acquire a copy. They are a bit expensive, but really worthwhile keeping. So he talks about being mindful of an ethic of reading. What does this mean? He does not elaborate, but throws us a hint by saying, I believe there is an ethic of reading, a responsibility in how we read, a commitment in the act of turning the pages and following the lines. I believe that sometimes, beyond the author's intentions and beyond the reader's hopes, a book can make us better and wiser. This last part is something we can all agree on. As for the earlier part, I would like to, at the end of this talk, see if any of you have any thoughts on what could be an ethic of reading. Yeah? Okay, next. Yeah, I want to just show you a librarian who is working at a very remote school near Nagpur in Maharashtra. And I feel he's a mindful librarian because the way he's listening and bringing about conversation with the children is truly remarkable. Yeah, next. So third point is the question, leveling books or leveling the child? Now, AASL, American Association of School Libraries, strongly discourages school librarians from labeling books to denote levels of reading. I'm sure you're all aware of what that is, right? Leveling books. It is to do with, having an age group and saying these books are for that age group. So AASL says, educate the children to find their own level. Actually, the child is more than capable of finding his or her own level. All we need to do is watch and learn. Unfortunately, leveling has now become the mode of functioning for many publishers and consequently, sorry to say, for school librarians as well, because it probably makes it much simpler to classify the books. But can the mindful librarian observe what actually happens in the reading journey of a child when he or she is asked to read according to a level prescribed, and prescribed by whom? That attentiveness and observation on the part of the librarian will make this practice of leveling much more flexible, sensitive, and relevant. Yeah, next. Am I okay for time? I hope so, because I lost track because of so many things. Now, one other thing, sorry, I think, yeah, this is not now. There is a previous slide, Darshana. So the fourth point, I have 5 points. So the fourth one is giving thought and care to use of space and shelving, being aware of the importance of appearance, accessibility, and ambience. Now, you may say, of course we do all this, and it's true. I'm sure we do. But many times as librarians, we may not give too much attention to all these aspects. We may be more concerned with finding enough space and assigning the right location to books. These are important, but can we give attention to arranging books with dignity? This is a word used by a librarian, and I could not get her name in time to share it with you. But this is how she spoke about arrangement of books. She said, can it be done with dignity? Creating attractive breaks for the eye while shelving. For example, you may be wondering why I'm breaking up this, the slides with pictures. And I think that's the reason I'm doing it, so that there is a break for your eye from reading. And there are pictures now and then for you to see. Making sure shelves are within reach of younger children. For children, it makes a great deal of difference to experience the library as a welcoming, bright and airy place. And the school, of course, must have functionality, but it must do more. It must convey beauty, color, and a sense of grace and space. Yeah, next, the picture to relieve your eyes. So some of the things we can do is to have attractive displays around, around a theme. Here, the theme is around post offices. Sorry, the slide is small, but there is a book about letter writing and stamps, and Gandhi's, a book on Gandhi where his stamps are shown. So that adds to the ambience of the library. Yeah. Last point, the fifth one of library being mindful in the best of times. So here, reaching out to individual students, to a group of students, and to the community of students. Now, this is really, really important. And I don't know if we are mindful, we can do it. Now, for me, S.R. Ranganathan is a great hero. It's true that he is old or was old when he wrote this book, but it's amazing how he has a feel of children. And always in his book, this book called New Education and School Libraries, I really recommend it to every school librarian to read. It's not going to be an easy read because his language is archaic and, he uses words which are ancient and not very accessible. But the core of what he's writing is just amazing. And for me, when I started off my profession as a school librarian, this was the book that I really went to. For example, in every aspect when he talks about it, he keeps children at the center. So he says he dedicates a separate section in this book for each of these aims. That is, reaching out to individual students, to a group of students, and to a community. He talks about providing help for immediate queries and needs, and also alertness and initiative to meet the long-term curiosity of an individual child. And the short quote says, in all that is done, the student must be taken as a partner. That is, for me, such an important thing that he says. Let me just show you the next slide. As a humorous, we all know about His Holiness the Dalai Lama as the ultimate mindful person. But here he is as an ultimate mindful librarian. He's sitting with an individual child, and the second child is also imbibing and enjoying what is being shared. Next slide. For a group or a class, S.R. Ranganathan speaks about supporting teachers who are in a search for material for projects. The librarian, he says, can make a careful search of all material that may be of use and then place these varied sources in an accessible and visible space with appropriate labeling. This is a separate display meant for that teacher's project and is kept there for a specific period of time. Now, we all know this, and probably many of us do it. But for me, it's just amazing that S.R. Ranganathan had thought of all these things and mentioned them. And it's good for us to kind of recapitulate. More to the point, he also talks about anticipating needs. This is so important for a librarian. It's not just being a librarian and saying and responding to whatever questions are asked or needs. We have to know our readers enough, users enough to anticipate their needs. So anticipating needs and requests by being mindful of current themes and trends, the librarian may pull out on his or her own interesting and linking material to suggest future projects. So this is not just in response to a teacher, this is your own initiative. The teacher finds these resources valuable and can look through them at leisure. In this way, the mindful librarian is one step ahead of the user's needs. Okay, next. So this is my colleague Yashodhara. I think she's here today present. She had gathered these books for a project on indigenous groups of people. Sorry, you can't see the titles, but it's about native peoples of America, of South America, of different parts of the world. It was a very beautiful collection for the project. Next slide, please. Lastly, reaching out to the community at large. Again, I'm going back to S.R. Ranganathan's book. He quotes from the Tamil poem Tirukkural, which says, its people, that is the people of that community, its people form the wealth of all the wealth of a community, and therefore asks us librarians to provide mental resources to the community, because in the cultivation of the mind, he says, human beings are enhanced and can enrich the larger population. So it's not just your student, individual student, your group of students, your teachers, you also have to reach out. So this idea opens a window for us to see in what ways we can reach out and interact with the larger community around our location. Next, please. So I have given just 5 examples earlier of what a mindful librarian can do to go deeper into the act of librarianship. I'm sure that all of you, many of you, can come up with many more. So maybe you can share them. But I have shared these as things which I feel covered the human resource, the collection, the appearance, and the individual students, used by students. Okay, so now what happens now? These are the worst of times, no, especially now. So, though I have said here they may not be the worst of times, it does seem to be the worst of times. So how can mindfulness throw some light on the difficult situation we are going through? In the sense, how can we continue to be librarians, school librarians, children's librarians, through this pandemic? Last year, when the first echoes of the pandemic were heard, our country went into lockdown mode very quickly. And my mind also went into lockdown mode. But thankfully, after a pause, my mind cleared and I began to count the blessings we still had. I began to list what was still active and was still available. Yeah, next. So what was available? Yeah, students were still there. Librarians, teachers, books were all very present, though each probably was in their own bubble. What was still possible? How could we reach out to these people? Telephone communication, online connections, walking, cycling, post offices were open. At home, parents were there. In some homes, grandparents were also present. Many homes had books, and many children still had borrowed books with them. What could we do with these positives? And this was something that some of us librarians and colleagues got together and made a list. And what I'm sharing is from that concerted list. That document can be shared with you, more of you, if you wish. Next, please. So what we did was, a few ideas that worked were to set up an online session with one class to begin with, and begin by asking them what they are missing the most about the library and reading, because that's the basic thing, right? It should come from them. What are they missing? And then ask them to help you, and together think of ways to respond. Children did come up with bright ideas together. Some things happened. And, so it worked. It was a nice thing to do. And also a nice feeling for them to think that we were aware that they were missing the library. Next, many homes have grandparents. No, sorry, next meaning, can you go back? Yeah, many homes have grandparents. We could ask them, or parents, to choose a book they liked when they were young, which is lying at home. And the student or the child reads that book, or even a small part of it, and asks why the grandparent liked it so much. Sometimes this generational gap feels like it's huge, but when you read the same thing that your parent or grandparent like, maybe you find something interesting there. Did the student find it interesting? Ask them to send you a mail by post about any interesting discoveries they made. And the post office is working very efficiently even now, let me tell you. Next. Yes. Yes, Arun. That's nice to see. Yes. Next, please, Darshana. Yeah. Then we had a treasure hunt from memory. You know, treasure hunt is what we usually play in the library, where you give clues about a book and children have to find it. But here, what we could do was send a description of a book on the library shelves to one student who then guesses the title, and he then sends a description of another book in the library to the next. And the chain activity can keep the children happily engaged and help them to recollect the library collection and even the location. It was interesting for them to remember, oh, I know it was on that shelf. You know, it was nice to hear them get excited about, oh, yes, it was on that shelf. Non-fiction and fiction. Children will probably have some or many non-fiction books at home. Try to connect, ask them to connect or link a non-fiction book with a storybook and make a pair. It's quite an interesting exercise for them. And if they arrange a display of pairs like this, take a picture and send it, they can say a few words about how they identified the pairs. I want to acknowledge this idea coming from my colleague Yashodhara. Next. So then, of course, craft, because children are at home and they want to use their hands, they don't know what to do. So ideas, bookmarks, book ads, book posters, book covers. And then when they had done that, we asked them, parents, to send us a picture, which we shared with the whole group. And mind you, if they couldn't go out and buy any special kg cardboard, use any scrap paper you find at home. I think that was fine to do. And then lastly, remember the chain letter activity that was so popular some years ago? I don't know if any of you are young enough to remember, old enough to remember that. But each student can send a book suggestion with a few sentences to say why it is being recommended to 3 classmates. And each of them must do the same to 3 more. And teachers and librarians can also be part of that. Okay, so next please. Next slide, Darshana. Yeah. So before I go to this, I wanted to also share something very nice. A Tibetan librarian that I know, because they have a community where all of them live. He went around on his cycle carrying packets of books that he had chosen for each child. And the nice thing about it was that he had to think hard. Do I know what this child might like, what this child might enjoy? And then even for the student, it was nice to know that the librarian had taken such personal care and interest. Okay, so what was the bright side of this difficult time? When lockdown happened, I feel mindfulness really came into focus. Many storytelling, reading out apps became available. People from different walks of life came forward to tell or read out stories, right? There were also free visuals from museums, art exhibitions, libraries made their collection available, freely available. And I feel there was a strong sense of comradeship and commonality. So we asked children to look or listen to any of these free outputs and send their responses. Also, to personalize this, we got groups of children online or even on a phone and read out to them from fiction and from non-fiction, class by class. This was a great hit as they felt connected with their classmates, teachers, and librarians. And I actually found, and a colleague of mine shared with me, that much more collaboration happened between the library and the teachers as we all realized that we had a common intent. We shared a common concern of how to keep children interested and active, alive. Yeah, next. So finally, don't know if I'm okay with time, because we started late, so I've lost track. Anyway, finally, what does it mean to have this sense of mindfulness in our daily lives as librarians? It The librarian remains steadfast in the face of any adversity. The librarian is sustained in her efforts to make the library truly a learning space in all ways. And he or she facilitates the dissemination of all facets of information. She reads widely so as to be a good guide, counselor, and friend to the students. And he recognizes authors who have an authentic voice so as to enrich the collection. And the school librarian contributes, along with students and teachers, to build an enduring library culture. This, I feel, is what it means to have a sense of mindfulness in our daily lives. Next. So I would like to end with a poem by the Sufi poet, mystic poet Rumi. I've called him a Persian poet. Actually, I looked it up and I found he was born in Afghanistan and lived in Turkey and Persia. I think he died in Turkey, I'm not sure. Someone can correct me. But this is the poem I want to share. Look beyond and further, and you will surely find much more than your eyes can see, much more than your hands can touch. You may see anew a world you thought you knew all about. Next one. So thank you very much for your patient listening. And if you look at this picture, how early do you think mindfulness could happen? This is a small child in a place in near Almora called Kausani, where I had set up a library in a shop actually. And he came so eagerly to read, sitting just on the steps, totally absorbed in this book. So if you have personal examples of mindfulness, if there is time, please share briefly. If you have questions or comments, please go ahead. And lastly, feel free to be in touch with me by old-fashioned email. And here is my email ID. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now it's interaction time.
Who is this? Achu. Thank you so much. That's quite a compliment to hear that you found my voice soothing and calming. I hope my children and grandchildren think so. Or my husband, actually. Thank you. Thank you.
So, dear participants, if you have any doubt, you can ask.
Can you ask any questions, or if anybody has any thoughts on that ethic I talked to you? What do you think is the ethic of reading that Alberto Manguel talked about? Just take a wild guess. It's okay. We are all friends here. Thank you, Kamala.
Madam, we got a question. Can I read?
Please do.
A class of 60 students, how can we manage? Although I want to do worthwhile for them, but I am unable to. This is a question by one of the participants, Miss Nina, ma'am.
So actually, there are some of you who probably have this number and still manage. But if you're asking me, I would say don't be intimidated by a number, because the minute you have a good contact and relationship with them, you can have them alternate times in the period. Some of them reading, some of them with you, some of them maybe helping with some library work. It's all a question of planning how to break them up into smaller groups. And the point is that when you have a good relationship with them, they will do it. And you can always tell them, next time I'll do an activity with you. Okay? This time you're helping the library to repair books. So it's just you have to have your materials ready. You have to have your mindfulness in play, and you can do it. 60, 80, you can still do it. I have done.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Madam, one more question we are having.
Please, yeah.
Technology comes with a culture of its own.
Yes.
Students come with that culture, and the gap between tech-savvy students and librarian, how to fill the gap? It's
I
by
think that, in fact, earlier I was going to say that, yeah. Who is that who's asking the question?
Mr.
Not
Arun.
this- Okay. Oh, Arun is asking. Okay. So Arun, earlier I was going to actually take Faisal's example as someone who really is completely hands-on with technology, and yet he has a very good grounded feel for library work and library interaction with children, right? So I think that when your student realizes that you don't have a position or a strong viewpoint which you're not going to move from, and that you are open, they too will be open to you. You may say, yes, I want to learn a bit more of technology from you, but I'm sure you will be ready to listen to something from me, which I may have to share with you. And really speaking, this has never brought about any kind of serious problem. The children are interested, you know, they are open. That's the interesting thing about them. They may be mad about technology, and so you begin to try to understand what makes them so crazy about technology. But when you understand what it is and you try to say, look, I also have something to share, and will you listen? They do listen. Try it. I don't know, Arun, if you agree with that. I'm sure you have tried it. Anybody else about the ethic? Otherwise, so I'll just share what I thought, what I got from that when I saw about the ethic. I think that, you know, there is a kind of a not an expectation, but almost like a respect from us towards the author when we read a book. That is, if the author has given his or her sincere energy and good intent to the book, I think for us it is important that we give the space of respect to read that book, to listen to that voice. Okay, for me that is an ethic. So it's not like as soon as you hear somebody as soon as you start reading a book, you say, oh, rubbish. You have to try and understand what made that author write that, and then maybe that is the ethic that you give. Either if you read it with that responsibility and ethic. Sorry, somebody asked what is the name of the Ranganathan book. I am so happy to tell you. It's called New Education and School Library. It is very old. I hope all of you have heard of the name of S.R. Ranganathan. I'm sure you have. But when he wrote this book, when he was probably around 70 years old, and it's amazing how much he seems to know about children. He says, don't talk down to them. You know, they are capable of their own views. They're capable of their own presence of mind. It's just, he is quite amazing to me. So I'm happy you asked about the book. I hope you look for it and keep it in your library to be read. Yes, there's some two points, one comment, one question. Can I just hear this, the earlier question, please? Somebody can read it out. In these trying times, somebody said.
Yes.
What
In
was
these
that?
trying times, almost everyone is being pushed to the edge of insanity. How do we as librarians walk the extra mile to keep us and others around us sane?
I think one is, of course, being sensible about personal safety and giving information about health and safety to others, right? But it's also important that we don't lose our cool in this. As I said, we need to be balanced and unflapped by every piece of information that we get, because we are librarians. We deal with facts, and as people who deal with facts, we should be able to convey that these are the facts, and not, of course, the situation is very, very dire, but to be safe and also to look outside of oneself and say, what can we do to keep children who are probably in a very confused state? What can we do to keep children diverted, engaged, thinking, thoughtful, and keep them also in a happy frame of mind? I think that is our service that we can do at this time. I'm sure you will agree with that, right? There was one more comment. I don't know who it was. Michael Little, is it?
Yes.
What was that, please?
I also really appreciated the phrase library culture, which takes us away from just tasks and to-do lists and adds to a spirit of the place.
Really, I'm sure all of you agree that there is a library culture that we all contribute to as librarians. And what we do to bring about this culture is what we do with the children. The interaction, the contact, the conversations, that's the culture. There's a culture of trust and openness. I think that, for me, is a very important thing. Trust. I have seen horror stories of college libraries where they have barred gates and narrow entrance. And when I asked the librarian why they do this, they are thieves, madam. So how can you relate to your children? So anyway, we have to start at school to bring about a culture of trust. Yes, Faisal, you're finally back.
Sometimes
so that can happen. So I think, and technology lets us down, mindfulness has to quickly take its place. Thank you for suggesting this theme. You don't know how nice it was to go into it for myself.